Welcome to the Passive Income Podcast. I am your host, Dividend Dave. Please be sure to join the Passive Income Posse by clicking that subscribe button below. I'm super excited for today's guest, Billy and Acacia, uh, retired for several decades now. So I'm going to throw it over to you guys to give yourselves a bit of an introduction, and then we'll get into the story of how you did it and everything. So go for it.
Okay, well, I'm Billy, and this is Acacia, my lovely wife, Acacia. And we retired in 1991 at the age of 38. We didn't just do this on a whim. Like there were no, the internet was not created back then, and there were no real mentors for us to follow or to bounce advice off of or anything like that. And so we actually started this process in about 1989. We I saw some magazines of a couple that was sailing around the world with their kids, and we'd both been working high stress jobs. And I was a stockbroker, branch manager for Dean Winter Reynolds on the West Coast, and Acacia owned and operated our restaurant. And it just got to a point with us where we ask ourselves, what are we doing this for? I mean, we were seeing less of each other than we would like to have, and we were both very successful. And so it just got to the question I started asking myself, and then I asked Acacia was, well, how much is enough? How much do we need to live the lifestyle that we're currently living? And so that was the premise of the whole thing. And then we took 2 years to really poke holes into our plan. I mean, every time, we kept coming up with what if, and how about this? What if this happens? What if that happens? And everything we poked holes, it just seemed like the balloon kept floating. And so we in 1991, in January of 1991, we gave 2-week notices and left the United States for the Caribbean islands. And I don't know, you want to add anything?
Just that we weren't seeing enough of each other. The relationship was more or less in danger. We were burned out on our jobs, both of them. And like Billy said, how much is enough? And he's always thought out of the box, which can be exciting and threatening at the same time.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of discussions, and some of them were high volume, as you might say. And, we decided that that was the best choice for us. And so we went for it.
Yeah, awesome. Interesting point there. Couples, not seeing enough of each other and just, burning the candle at both ends to work and to make ends meet and to do whatever. And you get to that point where you say to yourselves, "Okay, what are we doing here?" And it sounds like that's
Mhm.
exactly what happened in your story.
Yeah, we felt like we were drifting. Right? Yeah, I'll say we felt like we were drifting apart, and that's not what neither one of us wanted that.
Right.
Mhm. It was a
Yeah,
real
interesting.
clarifying moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a real clarifying moment. There was enough stress and enough pain, as you might say, that we had to like prioritize differently, and we chose to do that. And like Billy said, we made the decision, and then we left in January.
Yeah, for very small Caribbean island, I read on your website,
Mhm.
Nevis, I believe it was.
Nevis, yeah, it's a sister island of St. Kitts. It's a
Right.
36 square mile rock, but it's gorgeous. Princess Di used to vacation there, and it's a very nice island if you ever get the chance to go.
Yeah, for sure. I want to get back to what, and I've made this point too, because obviously I'm a little bit older. Grade or 1991, I was in grade, I believe 11. So I remember those days of pre-internet, and we didn't have apps on our phone. You couldn't do online banking.
We didn't have a
You,
phone.
you didn't have, well, you did, but it was attached to the wall with a cord,
That's
right?
right.
And so, yeah, I guess just how did you start getting into the investing side of, because I've again read on your website, you have some dividend paying stocks and growth stocks, and but back then, obviously, it was a lot more difficult to invest, right?
Well, let me just say here, Billy will finish this, but what ended up happening was we took a crisis and made an opportunity out of it. Our restaurant was closed down due to a flood in the town that we had it in, and the main water line broke. And so we were shut down for like 5 days or a week or something like that. And our bills kept coming in. We had employees we had to pay, taxes we had to pay, and so on. And we had no control over the fact that we were shut. And Billy decided that this will never happen to us again. So he decided to start investing, and that crisis is what changed our life.
So I opened an account with the local Dean Witter office, and we started buying Exxon stock. And there were mutual funds back then, but they were not anything like the index funds of today, and there were high fees and stuff associated with them. So anyway, we bought Exxon stock, and it had a nice dividend back then, and we started accumulating a fair amount of shares in there, and then it got to a point where it was time to buy a house. We had been renting prior, and so one of the financial mistakes that we've made in looking back, which hindsight's 2020, is we sold the Exxon stock to buy the house. And had we held the Exxon stock even through thick and thin and through today, now that's the question of whether or not we'd had the guts to do that. We'd been far better off and liquid. So anyway, so we bought the house, and then we at that time I got recruited. We were both working in the restaurant. I'm a chef by trade. I was trained in France and
oh wow,
trained in some very nice restaurants in the United States. And then the branch manager of the Dean Witter office came to me and asked me if I'd be interested in joining them, and I turned him down because I liked cooking. And by then we had the restaurant running pretty smoothly. We were both getting 3 days off a week. But then he came back at me a year later and asked me again. And by then I was getting burned out on cooking. And so I went ahead and tried it. I'd never worked in an office in my life. And so I didn't know how well this was going to go. So Acacia, ran the restaurant while I was studying and getting the licenses that I needed. And then fortunately for me, it just became natural. It's one of the easiest jobs I've had, was being a stockbroker. I sit in an air-conditioned office and talk on the phone. And so I excelled. I was getting award after award and leading the office in new accounts every month and just on and on. And then after 3 years, he came to me, my branch manager came to me with he said, I got another challenge for you. He said, let's go for a ride. So I got in his car and we drove south to another office of his. And he goes, you might want to think about what you're going to say, because you're going to be the next branch manager. And I said really? So anyway, that's how I got the branch manager's job. And then once I was in there, the guy that I took over from, he left because he joined a private money manager down in Carmel, California. Well, meanwhile, after about a year and a half there or so, he died of a heart attack. The guy was 36 years old.
Oh.
And that really hit me hard, boy. That just, I said, whoa, because there's a lot of stress in the brokerage business. I was managing
restaurant business.
That's true. That's true. I was in charge of about $170 million, and this is in the late 1980s, which would be a lot of money today.
Right. Yeah. Well, it was a lot of money then. It was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money then. And so, every time the market hicked up, I would be up all night. I had a shortwave radio, so I could, I don't know if you know what that is, but anyway, I used to listen to the Asian openings and stuff over there. So if I could get what was going to happen in our markets. This was before CNBC, before, 24-hour news. Any of that stuff. So anyway, that's how we got to the point where we just got burned out on it and said, let's try this out.
I'm going to quickly just bring up your website here. It is retireearlylifestyle.com.
Correct.
And I will put a link in the description below. Profile 20 questions press. I see you've done a lot of other podcasts and interviews and conversations on other things. So I'll just leave this link in the description for anyone that would like to check it out. But I am going to close it because I notice it keeps refreshing, which is causing us to causing a little refreshing thing. I don't know what's going on there. Anyways, quick shout out
Okay.
to your website there. I do
Thank you.
want to go back to that 1980s, late 1980s, $170 million, I believe you said. Late 1980s, 1987, something happened in the market.
Yeah. Yes, it sure did. And I
You
was
want
a
to talk about
stockbroker
that
then.
maybe?
Yeah, the S&P fell about 22%, I believe, in one day.
Yeah, Black Monday, if I recall.
You know, it started on Friday,
Yeah,
and then the Black Monday was the day that it really took the dump, and that was a shock. I mean, we we were invested, and I had clients invested in whatever, and my phone was burning the lines were burning up back then
yeah,
because that's what landlines. Um, but yeah, it was certainly interesting. You know, that was all blamed on derivatives back then, and so whether we came close to a meltdown then, and we also came close to a financial meltdown in 2007 and 2008.
right.
And so, you know, you're gonna in your investing lifetime, you're gonna have these things happen. I can almost guarantee it if you're going to be doing this for any length of time. And
For sure.
we figured out that we've gone through four bear markets, this one currently being the fourth since we retired. Now in '87 we were working, and so that was a little bit different. But
Yeah, and I've made this point on my show before that, you know, like you just said, you live long enough or live through it, you're going to go through these bear markets and these stock market crashes, the 1987 crash, the late 90s, early 2000s .com crash, like
exactly
you mentioned, the 2008 crash, I call it the 2020 COVID crash. But the
right.
other point I've always made is the stock market always recovers, right? Whether it takes 8 months, 12 months, 18 months, the stock market always recovers. So it's just a matter of, you know, hold on tight.
Exactly. We're going to get through this. And that's one reason why we recommend having a cash buffer. And, we have probably 4 or 5 years of cash sitting in a money market fund just for exactly these reasons. So we're not forced to sell.
Right.
And
And take
so,
advantage of some great buying opportunities.
exactly. If you're bold enough and you think you can time the bottom, yes.
Not so much timing the bottom, but just, okay, the market crashed and everything is on sale. So, find the
True.
companies that you believe in and are
Hmm.
willing to hold for the long term. So, definitely not recommending penny stocks and this
No.
isn't financial advice, but you look at those blue chip companies like you mentioned Exxon, or there's obviously so many others that
Sure.
if you feel comfortable holding them for an extremely long time, then go for it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If you're comfortable and if you've got the cash flow to maintain the position, you're not forced to sell. That's what you want to avoid.
Right. Okay, I do want to, hear more of your story, like past 1991. You've made this decision to retire very early and move to this beautiful little island in the Caribbean. I guess sort of what happens through the 90s.
Okay. One other follow up on what our decision was. When I was a branch manager, my clients would come in. They'd tell me about this great cruise they just came on, or they're spending 3 or 4 days out on the golf courses and whatever. And I'm managing their money, and I know how much they have, and we have more than they do. And so I'm going, wait a minute here, So that was another little thing that got me thinking about we could financially pull this off. Okay, so once we hit the 90s, well, like we said, we immediately moved to an island called Nevis in the West Indies, and the reason we did that was to everything in the islands moved very slow, and so I wanted to
Island
hit a
time,
wall. We didn't want to be tempted to get back into something else by hanging around in the U.S.
right?
And so we went down there and we spent 6 months on the island of Nevis just to slow down. And then we caught a sailboat. I used to manage the money for the captain of this small fleet down there that operated these not huge, but large sailboats, 200-300 foot sailboats. And so we caught a ride with him down to Grenada, and then we flew from Grenada to Venezuela, And we spent a little bit of time in Caracas, and then we skipped over to an island off the coast of Venezuela called Isla de Margarita.
Wow. So you just start traveling
Right.
simply because you can.
Exactly. And from there, we worked our way. We caught a island hopper flights where you could get on and get off, and we worked our way back up the island chain, and then back to Miami, and then back to California, where we had our stuff stored. And then we ended up buying a 28-foot fifth wheel trailer, and we traveled the western United States in that for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. Spent one summer up in Montana on a friend's ranch.
Nice.
And that was very, very nice. And just took our time traveling. We slow travel, going down the Pacific coast is awesome. And
yeah, wow. Van life before van life was cool.
Pretty much. Then we got an opportunity to come to Mexico. Some friends of ours were down here and said our apartment has an extra sub apartment. If you want to come down, you can rent it here, and for as long as you want. If you want someplace else, you can find another place. But we decided that we wanted to do international travel before we got too old. Listen, we're like 40, but before we got too old and we'd lose interest or couldn't do it, And so that became our international traveling start. And we just found that eventually we spent more time overseas than we really did in the States, which had all sorts of consequences and other decisions.
Interesting.
Yeah, like healthcare.
Okay.
And that's how we were traveling to Asia a lot, Mexico a lot, Guatemala a lot. And right now we're in Chapala, Mexico, on Lake Chapala. It's the largest expat community in the world. And that's how we discovered this area. Our friends invited us here, and Chapala's always been very good to us. And we've got an international airport within 30 minutes from us. And so it makes it easy for us to move around.
Cool. Before we kind of move on, through the 90s and into the 2000s, I want to get back to the sort of the investing side. And I know you're going to remember this. So like today, like we mentioned, apps on our phones, zero commission or very low commissions in trades. Back then, there were some very high, very high commissions just to buy a stock. So I guess any thoughts to that of like how that's evolved over time, like maybe like how much you paid for commission back in those days just to buy, say, 10 or 100 shares of whatever company?
Yeah, because I was a broker and I used to receive that. So, for what we call a round trip, that would be you buy 100 shares, you sell 100 shares, you buy 100 shares. That was about $250 that I would be credited with. Now, I didn't make all that, but that's what would go on my income for the office type of thing.
Right. So you were benefiting from those.
Exactly. I was benefiting from them. Of course, we didn't know the future at that time. So, I'm not trying to, I don't know. When I was a branch manager, occasionally I owned a personal PC. That's redundant. We owned a computer, an Apple IIe, and they were just coming out with the Macintosh and this and that back then.
Yeah.
And I'm at a branch managers meeting one time, and I brought up that why don't we have these things on our broker's desk and get rid of these expensive Quotron machines that we have on there, because they were large, expensive. We paid a company every month just to get stock quotes. And anyway, it went over like a lead balloon. These guys had no futuristic thought at all in their mind. And so, and here we are today. Now, I don't know how these guys do it today, other than being fee-based financial planners. Because a brokerage house, I don't know what those guys are making these days. They're making it's everything on the amount of money that you have under management. So.
Right. Yeah. Because there's so many more people now like myself that it's like, why would I pay a $9.95 or whatever commission when I can just go on an app on my phone and pay zero commission, right?
Exactly. We use all no-load funds now, and we use all, discount brokerage. So yeah, I wouldn't either. And with today's, because of the internet, and there's so much more financial education information out there, including like on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's how you found us. That there's really, in my opinion, there's really no reason you need anybody else. You're much stronger if you can do it yourself.
Oh,
And
for sure. And that's
and
like you said, the information is there. Just go and find it, whether it's Twitter, watching YouTube videos, just searching Google. Like you're gonna find way more information than what we had available back in the early 90s.
exactly, and you're much less prone to be ripped off by somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say that happens in the brokerage business.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yes.
So moving past the 90s into the early 2000s, you're still traveling the world. You're still, I guess, investing. Have you got, you mentioned that you had sold all of Exxon, and then I don't know, did you get back into some Exxon? Did you start investing in other companies? Sort of, I guess, just take me through the end of the 90s and into the 2000s.
Okay, we tried some individual issues, and some were good, some were bad. And I mean, I used options for a while and did that game, and then such what I mean, I had to know this stuff being the branch manager, so I mean, I would try stuff in our own account as well to teach myself as well.
Right.
And but it got to the point where mutual funds were just outperforming. One thing when I was a broker, we were living in Santa Cruz, California, which was a hot real estate market back then. It still is. And the biggest competition that I had being a broker was real estate. And so people would come to me and they say, well, why do I want to get in the market when I can just buy real estate and, make whatever percentage it was. So I went to the board of realtors and I got a quote for a 2, 3, and 4 bedroom home. And I got one for 10 years past 2, 3, 4 bedroom home. And I did the math on it and came up with an annual percentage. And I compared that to the S&P 500 through that same period. And the S&P 500 outperformed it. And without, fixing the plumbing, fixing the roof, painting, etc. And so that was my biggest sales marketing tool that I had to go against the real estate argument. So yeah, so what we did was we moved into mutual funds, and at the time we were using Dean Witter funds because I was a loyal employee, and they were fine, but they still really weren't matching the S&P 500. And then I started learning about this is right like when the Vanguard S&P 500 index fund was starting to catch a lot of media attention.
Right.
And so I took a look at that, and because my boss had to have access to any financial accounts that I had, I opened a Vanguard account in Acacia's name, and we started buying the S&P 500 fund over there. And so that's how we got started in that. And then as we through the years, we accumulated more and more over there, and plus in my own account, and etc. And then when we finally pulled the plug, we had a fair amount. We had about $500,000, $1991,
Oh, wow.
and that's what we went out with. And so, but at that time, we were more interested in growth. I mean, I know you're dividend Dave. I understand that, but because we were making salaries while we were accumulating assets, we didn't want to have to pay excess tax on those dividends. And so I was much more growth oriented. And the idea was the S&P would produce a 8 to 10% annualized return, which it has for 70, 100 years.
Yep.
And then we would pull just 4% off of that and let the rest reinvest. Well, that's what we did for many, many years until 2007 and 8. And at that time, we took advantage of moving funds into a dividend play called DVY. And it had a pretty nice dividend yield. And so we moved some of that. We still kept a lot of the growth stuff in the S&P 500, but we also started accumulating some funds of DVY so that we would get these quarterly dividends to give us some more cash flow.
Nice. So I'm not obviously I'm Canadian, and so I'm not overly familiar with the history of the IRA and the Roth IRA. But you mentioned that you didn't have a an outlet for a non-taxable back in those days. Was that something that came about since? Because it's my understanding that one of those accounts is now a tax sheltered type of account?
Well, both IRAs and Roth IRAs are tax sheltered, but the IRA, which is what we have, because the Roth was not created for many years after we'd retired, is an IRA that by putting money in, back then I think it was like $2,000 was the max. Well, you could deduct that off of your current year's taxes.
I
So
see.
that was a tax advantage of going with the IRA. The money would grow tax-free in the IRA, but when you pull it out,
You
it
were
becomes
taxed
a
on it.
taxable event as ordinary income.
Yeah, we have a similar account here called an RRSP, which is a registered retirement savings plan, but the
Okay.
exact same scenario.
Right. And then they came up with this idea of the Roth IRAs. And so that allowed you to put money that was taxed prior. Now you paid taxes on the money in the year you put it in. Then you can put your money into a Roth IRA and it grows tax free. However, when you pull it out, it's tax free.
Yeah,
You know,
which is
had those
nice,
been
right?
around, which is nice, yeah. Had that been around when we were doing it, we probably would have went that route, but we didn't. And so anyway, we did. You know, I'm through the years, I've got a kind of a mixed bag on both of those IRAs. One fear I have about the Roth is that there's so much money, there's trillions of dollars in the Roth IRAs now. And I'm just concerned that the federal government at some point is just not going to be able to keep their paws off of it.
Right.
But that's just me and my paranoia regarding our federal government. But the other side of that now, again, back to my point with either one of those IRAs, is if you're disciplined with money, and that's a big if. I think both of those IRAs are good for people who have a hard time controlling their spending because you put it in there and you're forced to keep it in there. But if you can just build up your assets outside of an IRA, then you can use them for collateral and other things without spending them on consumer goods. So there are some advantages to both sides.
Right. Yeah, just to let you know, so we have a similar one here called a TFSA, tax-free savings account, and
Mm-hmm.
it's my understanding it's completely tax-free. You're not tax putting into it. It's tax-free growing, and you're not tax taking it out. So it's a pretty nice scenario.
But your government doesn't have the debt that ours does.
Oh, we have debt, but no one has the debt that the US has.
No. And I don't, like I said, who knows? I hope it doesn't happen, but Congress made the rules. Congress can change the rules.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You never really know what the government's going to do,
Yep.
unfortunately, in any country.
Right.
So moving through the 2000s, you mentioned around that 2008 crisis, you got into DVY, which is that an ETF or an index fund, if I'm not mistaken?
It's an ETF.
Right. So, and
It's
go ahead.
well, it's oriented towards the last time I checked, which it's actually been a while, is the oil stocks are in there and utilities, things of that sort.
Right. So stuff that people need and use, and
Right.
it's not going away anytime soon.
Right.
And so then, yeah, obviously you're getting into that, the dividend, the passive income. You still have your growth stocks through the late 2000s, and then getting into the early 2010s. And where are you now in the world too? Still just traveling, and any given night, a new country could be. You could have a roof over your head or something.
Well, yeah, actually, we're working on plans now we're currently in Chapala, Mexico, like I mentioned, and we just got back from the beach about last Thursday, so 3 or 4 days ago, and we jump down to the beach quite often. I go about every 6 weeks. Acacia goes about every 2 months, or we fly around Mexico because it's good value. The exchange rate is friendly to us. That's one other thing that we've decided about living here is using geo arbitrage, which is another term that was not invented when we did this. But it didn't take me long to figure out that we were making dollars in our financial accounts and spending pesos in Mexico
Right.
for a pretty darn good lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so I said, the longer we can hang out here, the more our accounts are going to grow. And that's what happened. So anyway, we run around Mexico. We took advantage of the COVID time here when a lot of places were closed and everything. The airlines were empty, so we were flying around the country at cheap prices, and hotels were offering half price discounts. And so we did quite a fair amount of traveling through Mexico during that time.
Cool. Yeah. So you get to see a lot of it. Like obviously Mexico is another big country, and I'm sure there's a lot of places to see there as well. So that's
Oh,
pretty
very
cool.
much a huge country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, well, not obviously, but I've started looking into that myself. Apparently, Belize is a very popular destination for Canadian expats, and I'm sure probably American expats as well. And obviously, there's other countries to look at throughout, like you mentioned, the Caribbean or through Central Latin America, Panama and wherever else. So, yeah, that again, earning dollars, spending pesos, it looks very attractive.
Yes, yes, and it has been through the years. The peso strengthened some recently, but that's because their bank deposits now you can get 11% on here. So
Oh
they're
wow,
raising rates faster than the US, which is attracting dollars to the pesos and
yeah.
strengthening the peso.
But then your
Well,
pesos are earning more money too, because I'm sure you have some of those.
yeah, yes, we do not have any financial accounts in Mexico. We have chosen up to this point not to do that. There's no real need. Um, that's just a personal. We
Yeah,
know a lot
no,
of
it makes sense to
Americans.
me.
I'm sorry.
I said that makes sense to me, but sorry, you were gonna say?
Yeah, there's a lot of gringos or Canadians and Americans that do have accounts here. And what happens is that we've been through a few currency devaluations here in Mexico. And if you're holding pesos in a bank, well, your net has been devalued, and so that's a concern that I have.
Yeah,
We've
for sure.
also we've been to Belize a couple times, 2 3 times. We've been to Panama once, and now both those countries work pretty much on a dollar, so they're dollar based, and that's one reason that Americans and Canadians like to go there. English is a big language there,
Right.
so that's one thing that they like there. But Panama's a little bit more expensive, and Belize we didn't find to be that great of a value.
Yeah, and I've heard Costa Rica is also more expensive than the others.
Yes, yes,
I do have to ask you about safety. Obviously, Mexico and all of Central Latin America is known for the, the drug cartels and violence and all the bad things that go on there. Um, how do you feel about just the safety throughout Mexico and the rest of the countries you've traveled through?
Well, our country, our nation, the U.S., has a lot of violence too. Chicago's well known for that, and Miami and Dallas, Pittsburgh,
Detroit,
so yeah, Detroit, exactly. So you can walk through the school shootings and you can just be minding your own business and get shot just about it anywhere in those big cities. Um, We've never really felt threatened being here. We don't do anything like flash cash or digital toys or go out at 3 in the morning drunk, stuff like that. We don't bring our new best friend home or anything. And also, I just want to say, a long time ago, I read this book about the gift of fear. And that basically the premise is we are animals and we understand when something's not right. Our subconscious or whatever you call it
the
picks up
spidey
on
senses.
cues. Right. We pick up on cues. We know when something's not right. And it was written by a man who teaches self defense and worked with the government. And he says that when he interviewed people who were victims of violence, they all knew ahead of time something wasn't right. And so if you listen to yourself and don't be silly, wearing your jewelry and diamonds and hanging with digital equipment, you're going to be fine. For the most part, you're going to be fine, and just use common sense. We have fortunately not had any issues, and I'm happy about that. And
Yeah,
anywhere
that's
that we've
good.
traveled, you stay away from political demonstrations of any sort, whether it's Thailand or Panama or Mexico. You just stay out of it. You just stay
Yeah.
out of it. Keep your politics to yourself or leave them at home.
and we do not have a car here, so we travel by public transportation all the time.
Hmm.
So it doesn't concern us one bit.
No, that's good. That's good. I just wanted to ask because
Sure.
it is a concern to a lot of people. So
Yes, it
Sure.
is. Well,
um
that's the other thing too. You've got to think for yourself in a lot of areas, whether it's the government frightening you about the newest war we're going to be in, or the COVID, or the cartels, or whatever else they can conjure up. You've got to assess it on your own and decide. Do you want to live your life in fear? Do you want to live your life with some kind of common sense? Do you want to?
Right.
Not everybody wants to travel too. That's a big thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with staying home and raising the roses, or whatever, dogs. But some people want to travel, and that's who we are. That's what we do. And so we just utilize common sense. And the last thing we want to do is be somewhere and have the government shut us down. Billy was in Guatemala, and that was right at the beginning of COVID, and the government shut everything down, and there he was stuck in that country. Well, I'm here in Mexico, so
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's but that's government made, so that's
Right.
not cartel made, that's government made.
I had to hire a coyote to get me out of there. I don't know if you know what that is, but
Oh, yeah, I do. I watch enough. I watch enough of those types of shows.
yeah, well, I was with another guy there, and I told him, let's hit the ATM machine, get a lot of cash. We both had a lot of dollars and pesos with us, and we actually got stopped. The police caught us, and it was crazy. And so they were looking for a bribe, and we decided we were not going to give them a bribe. And fortunately, both of us are residents of Mexico. We have what's called the green card for Mexico.
Yeah.
And so I just kept telling them, look, you've got to let us go. We're residents of Mexico. You have to let us go. And they didn't know what to do with us. They wanted us to go back to the capital city, Guatemala City, and be quarantined for 2 weeks. And I just told them, look, that's not going to happen. so, I mean, we argued with them for about 45 minutes. And finally they said, okay, you can go, but your driver can't. So we were standing on the side of the highway in the mountains of Guatemala hitchhiking.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting story.
So fear? No fear.
You
Nice.
can't really let yourself go there. You know what I'm saying? You've got to keep focused on your goal, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And not let that fear take over. And it can very easily take over.
I'm interested in more of your story. Like we've kind of progressed from the late 80s, 90s, 2000s, sort of now getting into the 2010s, 2010s, and up to now. I guess what has changed even just in the last 10 years. And
well, I'll tell you a lot. I mean, I don't know. This isn't so much financially, but it does affect finances. Is that one? We no longer have a U.S. based health insurance policy. We did that for a very long time until we qualified for Medicare. We decided to take advantage of medical tourism, which the pricing, now this is probably different for Canadians because you get your stuff government issued, but we got much better prices around the world for medical care than we did back home. So that definitely affected us financially. And also we got rid of our car about 15 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. So we've been car free for a very long time, and you utilize local transportation. Of course, now you've got Uber and Didi and rideshare and all those other alternative sources of transport. And so those two things were pretty big, and that affects a lot of people's daily living. Most people have a car, most people have an insurance policy, that kind of stuff. So both of those things would be a financial change to most people's budget.
Yeah, paying for a vehicle is expensive, right? Gas, insurance, maintenance.
Yeah.
And they sit 95% of the time.
Yeah.
So it seems, the whole ride sharing thing I thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
We do utilize that here. We utilize Uber. When we go to Guatemala City, Guadalajara. Guadalajara is the largest city near us, and we go up there and they use Uber and Didi are up there quite good. Cool. One other thing about back to the finances is that we started pulling. What happened is around when we were 55, around 55 years old, which is 7 years prior to us drawing Social Security, I started taking money out of my IRA, which was a taxable event. But at that time, our tax rate was low enough, again, because we had mostly growth assets, that I didn't have to pay tax on that withdrawal. And so I started pulling money out of the IRA every year for us to live off of, until we started receiving Social Security at 62. And then once we did that, I turned that spigot back off and let the IRA accumulate again.
Interesting.
So I used it kind of like a bridge loan. It's a rule in our IRS tax code called Rule 72T that you can make a withdrawal prior to being 59 and a half. But there's some very, very specific rules that you have to follow. And if you break those rules, you have to go back and pay tax on the entire amount that you took out prior with a penalty.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, interesting that you're able to do it. Interesting that you're able to kind of finagle your way around the taxes. Well, pay the taxes, but still be able to have that money to live on for those 7 years, and then yeah, now you're basically the Social Security is that more or less sort of now pays your monthly expenses, and then you have some more investments for any extras, or how does it work now? I guess.
yeah, back to the taxes. One more thing, taxes are a huge expense. I mean, if you,
I've noticed.
and for you guys especially, and so you got to work the tax system to your advantage the best you can. So
Right.
anyway, yeah. So now that we're drawing Social Security pretty much covers our lifestyle, um, and that with dividends, well, more than enough covers our lifestyle. So in fact, that we still make investments as this, even today.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. So you're basically becoming an income investor where you can just keep you have the income from the investments, but you can still reinvest what you're not spending out of that.
Exactly. And sometimes I ask myself why, because I mean, it goes back to the question, how much is enough?
Right.
But when you're getting less than 1% on a money market fund, it's like, geez, this is kind of ridiculous. When I can go into the market, like I've been buying positions in SCHD,
Yeah.
that swap dividend play, and I can get 3% in there. So why? But I'm taking risk. So there's the difference. But now money market funds, our Fidelity money market fund, FDRXX, is paying 4.25% now. So that's becoming attractive now.
Yeah, that SCHD one is a very popular one on in the DivTwit community, and also has been a very popular topic here on the Passive Income Podcast with a lot of my other American guests. So it looks like an extremely attractive ETF. Like you look at the top 10 or 15 companies that they hold within that ETF, and it's just like, oh wow, they have like all the biggest companies, or the biggest growth companies, dividend kings, dividend aristocrats in there, and it's just like I've been it's basically on the very top of my watch list for American companies.
Right. And one thing I do is whenever I take a look at a new position or a new ETF, I compare it to what the S&P 500 has done over the last 10 years. So I put both of them on a chart, and if SCHD does meet that test, they're pretty close to the same return as the S&P 500,
Right.
and so with a higher dividend yield.
Yeah, and you can't beat that, right? That higher yield,
No,
and you're just like, okay, thank you, thank you for paying me
e-
to not work for you.
exactly, and you're also getting growth, which is important. Especially I can't stress this enough on younger people is to focus on the growth because
Yeah,
inflation will eat this stuff up.
yeah. I've had a lot of younger guests as well, and a lot of them are focusing on growth while at the same time still investing in some of these great dividend paying companies. A lot of them are building
Good.
incredible portfolios where they have, even if it's, say 50-50, 60-40, whatever, where they have, or even 70-30, 70% growth, and 30-35% dividends. And they're just, stacking those dividends as well at the same time. I'm like, wow, you guys are setting yourselves up for an incredible future. And when I
Well,
say young, I mean young. They're like, a lot of them are under 25 years old, right?
I
And
think that's great. I wish that we had some guidance back when we were younger.
right.
We neither one of us came from wealthy families. Neither one of us had parents who invested in the equity markets. They didn't know anything about this kind of stuff, and so it's all been just self-taught for us.
Yeah, more or less the same for me, right? Like, and back then too, it seemed like, money and finances were such a taboo subject. It does seem that it's becoming more open now because of things like social media, Twitter, YouTube, Google. Like you can just, like I said previously, you can find the information now if you're looking for it.
Exactly, and it's important to be self-educated when it comes to this stuff.
For sure, for sure. Okay, so we've kind of went through your entire story. Now, where does the future lie? Where are you traveling next? What are the big plans for the next 10 years?
Well, 10 years. Listen,
5 years, whatever.
I gotta tell you, our long term goal now is to make it to Friday. So, so you know, anyway, we're looking to go to Italy. Hopefully late April. We're trying to time it with the weather and that kind of thing. So Italy, Sicily, and Greece is what's on our radar right now. And there's always temptation to get. We'd like to go back to Vietnam. We've spent a fair amount of time in Vietnam and Thailand.
Nice.
But Vietnam has become our favorite for that area at this time. So anyway, we were last time we were in Europe was in 1979, and we went to where my family's name came from in southern Switzerland. And so this time we want to go to where Acacia's family's name started, and that's in southern Italy.
Oh, yeah,
And
very interesting.
So that's the plan. Plus, we want to eat our way through.
Being
Oh,
chefs
I'm
and
sure
restaurant
Italy, yeah.
owners, right?
Yeah.
Seafood, cheese, wine, olive oil. Yeah.
So I have noticed you definitely picked the warmer places around the planet, Southeast Asia, Latin America, Caribbean, Southern Italy.
Yeah, we are sun people. We don't like to be cold, and I mean we don't mind it. On occasion as a nice change, but not to live in that type of climate.
Why?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people like the cold, but we're just not partial to it.
No.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a summer in Montana, and I'm like, okay, well that's north, but even still, summer is pretty warm in Montana. So
Yeah, we were there until the first snowfall, and then we got out.
You're like, okay, I've seen a snowflake. It's time for me to go.
Yeah, time to go.
Exactly. That was early September, and we said, Alan, we're out of here. So,
it's starting to warm up here. It is still going below freezing overnight and getting above freezing throughout the day for the most part. So it's that nice time of year.
It hit 80. It hit 86 here yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's warm.
That's warm for here, actually, because we're a mile high.
Oh, yeah. So that can probably get fairly cool too, because just the
it's
elevation.
pretty consistent. It's pretty constant through the year, the temperatures. It never goes to freezing here.
Right.
Thank God. And it's a rare day to be in the upper 80s.
Right. Yeah. It's not here. Like in July, it gets really hot here in July, actually. June and even the end of May, June, July, and into August, it can get too hot here. Just we get humidity that's crazy. So
where are you?
I'm about 2 hours east of Toronto, so just obviously on the north side of Lake Ontario.
Okay. Yeah, we both spent some. Acacia broke a leg out in Calgary or in Sunshine Village, learning how to ski outside of Calgary, outside of Banff. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
And
that was actually my next question: is if you've ever been or ever coming to Canada, but skiing. So you were here in the winter.
Yeah, we were.
That was back then, though.
Yeah, and we'd ski, Monday through Thursday. So the lines were not as long, and then we'd ski from 10 in the morning to 2. So like when the sun was up.
Right.
So we were kind of pansies when it came to the cold.
And then in California, we used to ski up around Lake Tahoe.
Right.
But that was if I have to put more than jeans on, I'm not skiing. So
I mean, we've been cold. We've had the whole red here and everything from the cold. We've done it.
Been there, done that. Time to stay.
Yeah, we've done it.
Yeah.
I mean, we were both born in the Midwest, so like we understand humidity and cold and snow and all of that. We're just kind of joking, really. But then we didn't know each other back then, but coincidentally, both of us moved out of Ohio because of the weather, and we met up in California. So it was just kind of just coincidence, really.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting part of your story as well.
Do you ever ask your people like where they would like to retire? Is that like an issue, or are you just mostly money oriented on your podcast?
A lot of what we do is just talk about different companies and sectors and what people like or dislike about them. Sometimes we get into the retirement aspect. Like I've had a few other guests like yourselves living the FIRE lifestyle, financial independence, retire early, and that income investor lifestyle where they are, living off of their dividends, but still reinvesting the portion of their dividends that they don't need to live off of. So it's like, yeah,
Sure.
and that's really inspiring to everyone else that watches this
Mhm.
podcast, because people are like, oh wow, sort of they did it, I can do it too. And I find that a lot of
Mm.
that inspiration on Twitter as well. It's like, okay, people that are posting, oh, I made 7 grand in dividends this month, and they're literally not bragging. They're just saying, listen, if I can do it, you can do it too, right? So
Sure.
Exactly. And there, Dave, there's another part about retiring early that's very important, other than the money. And it's what are you going to do with your time, especially if you're young? We were 38 and both very I don't know, type A personalities or something. We're
Yeah,
both
we're
used to
ambitious,
producing.
productive, right?
right.
And so, I got involved here in the local community in Chapala with I coached a women's basketball team, and then I imported an electronic scoreboard for the gymnasium here, and that got me very well known in the town. And then I ended up taking over the tennis courts in the local park here. There were 4 tennis courts, and myself and another guy, we cleaned them up and raised money to have them resurfaced. And then we got to be so busy that I raised the money and built 2 more courts. And so we got heavily involved here. But it's important to know what you want to do with yourself. It's not just the money.
Right.
There's
You
Yeah,
need
there's
something
a
to do,
whole other,
whether it's volunteering or
right. Make your life productive, make yourself feel like you're actually contributing. We tout volunteering quite a bit because it's so rewarding. And if you don't need the money, since you're retired, volunteering can just be that other half of what you're missing from your work, perhaps,
right.
and then just the emotional. We have people that we talk to that are young retirees or almost retirees, and it's not the money, but it's just the courage to pull the trigger, maybe. Or, well, I can't talk about this to my parents because it would be embarrassing to them, they're still working, and then we retire before them. It's kind of, we have to lie or something. And
Yeah.
it's that emotional component. You think, what will my friends think? Because they're all still working and spending, and we've been working and saving. And now if we just pull off, they're wondering like, well, how did you do that? What? Well, oh, you're too good. You don't want to socialize with us anymore. There's all that side to it that isn't always discussed.
occasionally taught English as a second language down here
Yeah, that was fun.
to a group of people. And, there's fortunately there's needs. We all have skills,
Right.
and there's needs all over the world for people that are willing to take the time and to teach other people.
Yeah, and we know people that if they don't have that skill themselves, they organize it. Like a lady friend of ours organized acupuncturists and dentists and so on, people, doctors and stuff, to go to Guatemala and help out the locals there. And the doctors donated and their time and equipment and such, and then the local people were able to benefit by the dental care or the acupuncture or whatever else they were bringing in. And that was just, she wasn't a dentist, she just organized it. So it doesn't
Right.
matter where you are, but you've got skills. You don't retire early without skills.
Right.
And
This is
helping other
important.
people is very rewarding.
Absolutely.
Exactly. This is important, and it's a big part of what's lacking in the FIRE community, in my opinion.
This has been an absolutely incredible conversation. I've loved talking to you. I do have another question. How many total countries have you been to? I believe there's 197 countries in the world. How many do you think you've checked off the list?
We never
counted?
no,
Yeah.
because a lot of countries, or like the Caribbean islands. I mean, there's a ton of them.
Yeah.
Not a ton. There's a lot of them, and we've been on a lot of them. But I mean, we didn't live on each one of them, but we've been there.
Yeah,
And
visiting.
like
And
the EU,
so-
when we were there, it was Europe, and each one was a different country. So if you go to the EU, is it just one country because it's EU, or is it like 12 or whatever?
I'd still
Whatever.
consider it all different countries. Obviously, like
Yeah,
France, Switzerland,
Yeah.
Austria, Germany, Poland.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, but see, you're older.
I guess.
That's what happens. See, the
Yeah.
younger generation is only going to know it as the EU.
Yeah, maybe.
We've been to a
Another
lot of
warm
them.
country that you haven't mentioned, but I'm just kind of curious if you've been there or ever planning to go. Australia.
We've been
Oh yeah,
there.
we've been to Australia,
Okay.
New Zealand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ecuador, Venezuela, Colombia. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, we
El
just
Salvador.
El Salvador. Yeah.
Uh,
All those.
yeah.
Yeah. We've been to Europe too. We went to several countries there, and Laos and Cambodia over in Asia, and Vietnam and Thailand, and yeah,
Wow.
there's just it just opens your mind so much.
When
Yeah, it does.
when you go to Asia, especially for you and us, it's a hike,
Yeah.
and it's not like flying across the country or something as far as airfare goes. It can be a chunk of airfare,
Hmm.
and so it's best to stay over there some time and amortize your flight. So it got to where we would spend a full 365 days in Asia,
Oh, wow.
and then just because that's the longest we could extend the return ticket. Now today you can buy one ways. You can go online and buy a fake return ticket, so you can go enter these countries with a one-way ticket, which gives you even more flexibility. Back when we were going over there, they didn't. That was not around yet. So, not that I'm trying to promote anything fake or anything, but
Yeah, yeah.
Look at your options. There's
there are
always
options.
Yes.
Yeah, great advice. Like I mentioned, this has been just an amazing conversation. I've loved talking with both of you about your
Thank you.
entire journey. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I would say to incorporate risk into your life on a daily basis so that when you do take a step into something new, it's not so huge and challenging that you can't manage it. And what I mean by risk is, not jumping off a cliff or bungee jumping, not necessarily, but we talk about just ordering something different from the menu or walking on the other side of the street, or instead of driving your car, take a walk or something, what I'm saying, riding your bike, or just small risks on a daily basis to break up your pattern and routine. Some people cannot get out of that pattern, and then they can't get out of the lazy boy. And so the idea of going, even to a paradise island or a paradise ski resort is just way too much for them to handle. And if you incorporate risk on a daily basis in the small steps, you'll be able to keep yourself moving enough to take a chance without it devastating you.
So
We find it
basically, just do
exciting.
something different.
Yeah, we
Yes.
find it exciting going to new places where
Mm.
we've never been and we don't know. We try not to do too much research on it before we go, so that we have our own experience. And
Yeah, that's interesting too. Some people just research the living daylights out of a place they're vacationing, and then there's no real surprise when they get there.
no, and that to me, I'm already bored.
Yeah,
So no, we want to go and kind of, we want a place to stay, to land, a place to get to right away. But then once that's done, that's pretty much okay. Let's start talking to people
Mhm.
and see what's going on around here.
You can learn so much about history and about the architecture and the local culture and the indigenous people. It is just amazing. The world is such an amazing place. And if you like to do sports or scuba diving or hiking or any of that, just you
the
become
world is your
one with.
playground, right?
Oh,
Exactly,
nice.
exactly. And the beauty of being retired early is that you've got the energy, and you've got the time, and you've got the assets
Right.
that you
Mhm.
don't have to return. And so, learning about travel is the greatest place to learn about travel is from other travelers.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, you find a place, oh, you should go to this town. Well, okay, nothing's holding me back, so let's go. So, you know,
Awesome.
you got
So
to
again,
be comfortable with the unexpected. If
It's
yeah,
gonna
that's
happen.
great.
it's going to happen.
It's gonna happen.
Yes, it's going to happen.
So again, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation. This has been
Thank you for
just
having us.
Yes.
amazing. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. If you're still watching or listening at this point in the episode, you know the rules. You have to subscribe. The button's right there. Just click it.
Thanks,
Subscribe.
guys. Thanks for having us, Dave, and we'll see you all soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. I just hit end recording. That was great.
Okay.